Thank you, Councillor Darby. I've got Councillor Casey and Member Taipari.
I want to move an amendment to remove the word freehold from one of the recommendations, which is recommendation 5, so that we should be considering a long-term lease, and I'd like to speak to that. We are on a journey, but we seem to have left the public of Auckland behind us again, and while there has been plenty of private sector engagement, there has been to date no public sector engagement. And love it or hate it, this building has a place in the hearts and minds of Aucklanders, and quite a few. I think it was the ugliest building in the Herald some years ago. Nonetheless, it's a place that people recognise the instant you come into Aotea Square. And the best way to preserve that building and protect it into the future is to keep it in our ownership. And that's what I want to test through this amendment. I'm very happy for that to be put. And it's as simple as that. We haven't asked the public of Auckland for permission to sell. We've been discussing it behind closed doors for a number of months, and I'm not at all sure that the public would be behind us selling this strategic asset, although it's not listed as one. I would imagine, I was quite surprised today to find out it wasn't listed. Had we been engaging with the public, I might have a different view of all of this, but we're not. We're making the decision today to keep the word freehold in there, and I'm not sure that we have public backing. So if Arthur's going to second that, I'm happy to test it.
So okay, it's your right to put an amendment up, Councillor, but I think we do need to also understand the practicalities of this. If we are looking, and if we listen to Councillor Darby's wise and well-expressed vision for this site, if we start foreclosing a variety of investors on this site by narrowing the opportunity for money to be put into this, let's not forget, councillors, no one put up an amendment, no one put up a recommendation, no one put any money in the LTP for this building. Right. So if we narrow the tunnel to such a small diameter that no private business can pass through it, then we are condemning this building to languish. So I will allow this to go forward as an amendment. Councillor, I for one won't be supporting it. I just need to make that clear. So let's just deal with that. Moved by Councillor Casey, seconded by Councillor and I. We'll get to that. I just had Councillor Brewer as a speaker, and then we'll just deal with the amendment. And Councillor Walker. Councillor Brewer.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to throw a few things out here, and I wanted to put this proposition to you. Can you imagine the chairman of ASB and the board of directors at ASB sitting on the top floor of Wynyard Quarter today deciding what to do with 135 Albert Street? This project has languished far too long, and the ASB, they knew exactly what they were going to do with that building, and negotiations and talks began with us as early as 2011, when we made a decision at Strategy and Finance to rationalise our buildings and to get out of Civic and to begin negotiations with the leadership at ASB. As soon as they nailed Wynyard Quarter, they were extricating themselves out of Albert Street. But no, only at Auckland Council would we leave a building empty for so long. You may say, oh, we only moved out of there 6 months ago. This is going back 4 years that the decision was made. And again, if you want a direct comparison, if you're a shareholder of ASB, what would you be thinking if their chairman and their board were sitting around wondering what to do with an empty Albert Street this morning? So what we've seen is a huge increase in the numbers that we were given on retrofits, on refurbishments, on demolitions than as we've seen across the construction sector in the last 4 years, and that's again all going to fall potentially, maybe if the private sector don't come in on the ratepayer. And I challenge the comment that we are past the point of demolition. Based on what? it's not good enough for the council, it's not good enough for us to be there, but we're expecting someone else in the commercial sector to take it up with great vigour. And we've sabotaged it with our own urban planning and our CBD kind of waterfront sprawl and ASB theatres down there and everything else, that we're now expecting that same private sector to not go and join the ASB and everyone else down in Wynyard Quarter and at the bottom of town in Britomart, but to come back and make an exception and rent and redevelop this. And then residential, we're asking them to forget about reverse sensitivities that we've been warned about for 4 years and perhaps turn this into a hotel or a residential accommodation. So to me, I remember sitting in 2011 across the way there and next to Councillor Coney, and we were advised in 2011 that under the Central Area District Isthmus Plan of 2000, this building did not pass the threshold for protection. Many of us, not all of us before interjections, but many of us at that point in 2011 would have predicted that the most likely outcome for this building would probably be demolition. And so for this to languish, and I accept that it has now got heritage status, but I also point to the previous advice that we've had in 2013 that even with this heritage status, it's not necessarily impossible. We're not past the point of no return on potential demolition. Quote, it is unlikely the council could demolish the building, unlikely. And so I think shutting down demolition now, when we still don't know the market feedback, might be a bit premature, and it might come back to us in the coming months or years that perhaps that might be a more prudent measure given the lack of commercial, residential or hotel interest, perhaps. And so if we've got 2 pages of 1 page of resolutions of possibilities, we very much need to keep that possibility of demolition there. Otherwise, if they do come back, the officers, we'll have to set them off to go and see what our legal standing is in and around demolition, the cost of demolition, redo that. And so I'd like that work to be done when they, without kind of further appointment. So for me, Madam Chair, it's I'd like to see the demolition at least remain there. It might not be a preference for many, but it was an assumption for many back in 2011 when we began this process. And I remember Sandra Coney saying, oh God, we need to put some heritage clause on this, and some of us, Councillor Webster, might have groaned in a few things and thought, surely this building hasn't got adequate heritage protection. But it has, and it's won it on merit. I also note that while Councillor Darby was waxing lyrical and very eloquently about its credentials, which no one would disagree with,
For a long time.
it's not necessarily that old. And I'm going to ring up my 49-year-old brother after this and tell him, as a 1966 baby, that there's now buildings as old as him that are going to get that have got heritage protection. So look, I don't want to.
Maybe I'll get heritage protection.
You're a living treasure, Councillor Flex. So I don't want to minimise its credentials. That has been independently assessed. They are there, but we should certainly keep the option of potential demolition on the board, because I don't think we've passed the point of no return on demolition. I think let's make that decision once we've seen the market interest. It wasn't good enough for us to stay in there, but we're hoping someone else will, and I don't think that's necessarily good for it. And finally, Madam Chair, I am disappointed that 4 years on, doesn't feel like we're much closer, and an empty building standing, one that we much love apparently, that's standing there rotting, and again, the ASB chairman and board of directors wouldn't be in their jobs tomorrow if they tried to make that decision today.
Thank you, Councillor Brewer. I've got Councillor Walker.
Sure.
Just, I think we need to deal with the amendment and the recommendations.
I'd just like another option to be considered as part of this process. If we look at the history of the civic building across the way, The reason it's there is because it was the most appropriate location for a civic building to fit with this building, the town hall. The town hall ain't going anywhere. The reason that we advanced the ASB and bought the ASB building was because we knew we had a problem with the civic building at that point in time, and there was an opportunity to pull in some of the staff that were elsewhere around the place. That ASB building, frankly, is an office building. It's not a civic building, it's an office building. It could easily be.
Councillor, I'm just aware we've still
Just
got
hear
some
me
very-
out.
I will
It
in a
could be
moment.
flogged off.
I'm not telling anyone off. I'm just saying we just need to stay with the future of the civic building and putting out expressions of interest.
That's precisely what I'm
We can't
coming
stray
to.
onto the
That is precisely what I'm coming
Albert
to.
Street building, just in the interest of time.
So, one of the options going forward could be redeveloping that site as a new civic site, so that we might have a building complex there that could accommodate all of our requirements and incorporate the existing civic building. And we could flog off the ASB building, which we own, and I don't doubt that we would make a generous profit on that sale. Manson's, when we were considering the prospect of where we would go, offered to build a building across the road in the immediate vicinity of the civic building just on Merrill Drive. I'm sure there are developers out there that would be happy to put up a proposal for us for that site.
Okay.
If we are looking at the long-term civic future of this council and looking at where it is best to locate things, surely that should be an option on the table. We were talking about spending, how much was it? $7 million for a reconfiguration at the ASB building for a meeting room because it's not fit for purpose. So here's an opportunity to look at that and actually put that on the table, and we would have some latitude, and we could have a building that was fit for purpose for this council going forward into the future.
Remember, councillors, all we're doing is sending this off for expressions of interest. Should this wish, or should a large office development be put forward, we have every ability to release and to sell off the Albert Street building that we would make a handsome profit on, as you say. So let's not get too carried away with adding all of that in at the moment.
Well, I'm
But
just
it's a
asking
possibility,
whether
councillor.
this possibility might be something that we would put out there.
2011, did you say?
Okay,
Yes,
yep,
now
and
it's 15.
what we're saying is, and I'll repeat what I said, and I'm sure Jim will back this up, if there are expressions of interest that come forward for large office developments, we have every right and every opportunity to look at the feasibility of moving back the other way and selling off Albert Street. That would be a discussion that this council would have. It's extremely premature for us to even look at that. At the moment, we're floating out there. Can anyone do anything within the constraints that we've set to save, resurrect and restore this building? That's what we're talking about at the moment. So let's focus on the job in hand. I've got Councillor Clow, Councillor Renai, Councillor Crum.
I know where my colleagues on my either side are coming from with their amendment, but I can't support it because, to be quite honest, that may be the only way we're going to preserve it. It could be that's the only proposition that comes back where the interested party is only interested if it's freehold. And given we've got nothing at all in the LTP, it's pretty dangerous if we reject that as an option, because there's no money in the LTP and you are going to therefore, and we decide we want to keep on holding, it's going to sit there derelict for a very long time,
Until it falls
which
down.
is not a good look. But councillors should remember, those that are supportive of preserving should remember the initial recommendations that really came through finance were kind of designed to basically come back with a scenario that, look, there's no option but to pull it down. It's the councillors, the majority of councillors have said quite emphatically to Tim and Clive that it's not the option at the moment. It may end up the option if we've got nothing else, but the option is we really want to explore preservation. So I think we should stick with that, and because it's clearly the mood out there and it's the mood around this around this table, but as I say, that if we knock out the freehold, that may undermine our desire to preserve it, so I can't vote against that.
All right, we'll
Sorry,
just
can't
hear
vote
from
for.
councillor Anai, councillor Crum, and then we'll go to the amendment. Councillor Anai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I probably sound like a broken record around this table. Keep on bringing up the need to provide essential services, housing for essential services in the inner city, and I've said that this site here we should be looking at. I'm supporting removing of freehold. I mean, Cameron Brewers has mentioned about the ASB selling the land, but how much has that land, 135, gone up since we bought it? Gives you a clear indication of what happens to the value of property in the inner city.
Doubled.
And so that's why I'm totally against selling, because that's exactly what's going to happen tomorrow. But I just wanted to say, I've said it before, and we should look at the proposal of how can we on that site provide accommodation for essential services for the needs of the city as we grow into the future. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, councillor Anai. Councillor Crum.
Thank you. I'm to a certain extent happy to load up the EOI framework with ambitious restoration caveats, but as in line with our next item, the Hobsonville precinct, we need some timeframes around this, and I'm not sure, well, I know, I don't see it reflected in the resolutions, and I certainly don't see reflected in the resolutions that if this doesn't work, then all options are back on the table, including demolition. And I know there's mentioned the majority of councillors, and depending on who you're talking to, we all agree with a non-demolition. Well, I don't think that's quite right.
It's not.
So
I didn't say
I,
all,
for one,
most.
won't vote for any of this unless it contains a time frame for this ambitious set of restoration targets, and then has provision for coming back for demolition as an option. We can go out and we can try this, but if it doesn't happen in a time frame, we're back and everything's tabled.
Yeah, I've just had an amendment from councillor Brewer saying, can we put demolition back on the table? I think councillor Darby was being hopeful and visionary and saying, let's knock ourselves out trying to get a really good result for this. It may well be, however, if we aren't prepared to put ratepayers' money into this, that the demolition might be back on the agenda. There's nowhere in here in either recommendations nor the report that says demolition is off the agenda, so we probably need to say that. But I understand councillor Darby's sentiments. Let's put every bit of energy we've got into saving this, refurbishing and restoring this building. But councillor Crum and councillor Brewer, if we are not going to put money in and there are no willing investors or buyers or developers, then we're going to have to go down that sad path to investigate that as an option. I think every single person in this room hopes that that isn't an option.
Not necessarily.
So,
Don't speak for me.